Imagine, just for a second, going on a date with a massive global superstar. You're probably picturing total glamour, sky-high confidence, right? Like this untouchable aura. Well, a recent totally viral YouTube date featuring the legendary illusionist Princess Tenko and comedian Cookie completely shattered those expectations. And honestly, in the process, it unexpectedly revealed this incredibly profound psychological truth that, believe it or not, applies to almost all of us. So today, we're diving straight into a fascinating explainer of this event, unpacking that massive gap between the face we show the world and what's actually going on deep inside our minds.
Okay, let's dive into this because the source material kicks off with this absolute gut punch of a premise. A person who cannot move unless they are perfect has not truly taken a single step forward. Man, that hits hard, doesn't it? It basically suggests that what we so often praise, having high standards, absolute dedication, might actually just be a form of paralysis. We're going to explore how this seemingly quirky celebrity encounter perfectly captures the essence of that exact quote, and how our own drive for absolute flawlessness can secretly trap us in this state of, emotional childhood.
To really wrap our heads around this, we've got to look at a massive, almost unbelievable contradiction. So in public, Princess Tenko is this globally renowned genius magician. She performs literally death-defying illusions on the world stage. But on this date, the absolute second she stepped out into the city, she was just intensely anxious. Actually, she had to hold her date's hand just to walk up to a storefront. She was acting with the timidness of a very young girl, rather than a mature, worldly woman. I mean, she was literally terrified of something as simple as pouring okonomiyaki sauce.
And to truly grasp just how shocking this behavior is, you have to understand the sheer, mind-boggling scale of her success. 50 million. That is her reported hourly wage in yen. I mean, that's operating in a stratosphere of wealth and fame that most of us can barely even comprehend. Yet, despite having the world at her fingertips, her basic interactions with everyday society were just completely flooded with overwhelming fear. The source text makes a really crucial point here. This drastic drop-off, you can't just brush it off as a quirky celebrity personality trait. It begs a much deeper, kind of darker question. What on earth did she have to sacrifice to attain that level of success? Well, the answer lies in something called a human contract. And yeah, it is exactly as intense as it sounds. From a very young age, she was bound by this extreme agreement with her master. And we're not just talking about a strict practice schedule here. It literally restricted her basic emotional freedoms. She was put under severe constraints, like, for example, the explicit rule that she was absolutely not allowed to laugh outside. Because she was kept in this highly unusual, incredibly isolated bubble, she just never got to experience the normal, messy, everyday interactions that help a person grow up. As the analysis points out, emotional development doesn't just magically happen as we get older. It requires making small mistakes, having emotional swings, building up resilience over time. And because she was totally denied all of that, a huge part of her emotional development was basically frozen in time.
And this frozen emotional state brings us to the second layer of the psychological iceberg we're exploring today, the true root of perfectionism. During the video, there was this highly specific, frankly pretty awkward moment at an okonomiyaki restaurant that just perfectly encapsulates this concept. So let's break down the psychology of exactly what happened there. So the situation escalated internally for her very quickly. When asked to practice pouring the sauce, her first thought was that she absolutely could not execute the task flawlessly. Second, that realization triggered this intense, paralyzing fear of public failure, the sheer terror of being seen doing something poorly, of being mocked or losing her high status. And finally, her response was to just completely refuse the action. She made it crystal clear. If she couldn't do it perfectly right out of the gate, she wasn't going to do it at all.
Now, what's really interesting about this idea is how it completely flips our standard everyday definition of perfectionism right on its head, right? We usually think of perfectionists as these stoic, hyper-dedicated people with massive aspirations. But the source frames it in a totally different way. Perfectionism is actually revealed as a self-defense strategy. Think about it. For someone raised in an environment where failure was literally forbidden, showing a messy, in-progress version of herself is terrifying. Her perfectionism isn't some quirky superpower. It's a massive, heavy protective shield built by someone who has never, ever given the grace to just make a mistake.
All right, let's dive even deeper into this iceberg. Because if perfectionism is her shield against failure, how does someone with a stopped emotional clock handle everyday social connection? The video revealed another behavior that is so incredibly easy to misunderstand: her constant name-dropping. The text brilliantly describes this phenomenon as a very glamorous kind of loneliness.
Throughout the whole date, whenever she talked about her famous connections, her eyes would just light up. She got so incredibly enthusiastic. Like, there's this one moment where she eagerly shares this highly specific, almost unbelievable story about how she was taught to eat ramen by a direct descendant of Confucius. I mean, wow! On the surface, it is so easy to roll your eyes and dismiss that as just, typical bragging from an out-of-touch wealthy celebrity, but look closer. Notice what is absolutely 100% absent from these conversations: her inner feelings.
The analysis offers this heartbreaking but honestly profound perspective. This kind of name-dropping isn't actually bragging at all. For someone who was raised under strict emotional suppression, talking about their own actual weaknesses, their anxieties, their true feelings, that is incredibly dangerous. But talking about the amazing, powerful people they know, that's safe. It's this highly structured, predictable way to gain approval and feel a sense of connection with the person sitting across from them, all without ever having to expose their own hidden vulnerabilities. It's basically a desperate attempt to feel connected when you are, at your core, profoundly isolated.
Now, at this point, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, well, this is a super fascinating psychological profile of an eccentric celebrity, but what on earth does it have to do with me? But here's where the source text masterfully pivots. It moves from analyzing Princess Tenko's extreme life to holding up a giant mirror right to the rest of us. It asks a really tough question. Have parts of your emotional clock stopped too? And this brilliantly illustrates the core message of the whole piece. You absolutely do not need to have a multi-million-dollar human contract to experience this exact same emotional freeze. If you grew up with parents who constantly denied your feelings, or if you were severely punished for tiny failures, or, and this is a big one, if you were under relentless pressure to be the quote-unquote good kid, your emotional growth can freeze in the exact same way. The everyday symptoms are remarkably similar to what we saw on that YouTube date. Constantly worrying about how others perceive you, being so afraid of failing that you don't even try in the first place, or needing this deep, deep emotional dependency just to feel safe in the world.
So these feelings aren't just limited to a celebrity living an isolated life, they're actually surprisingly universal. But the goal of this explainer isn't just to diagnose our anxieties and leave us hanging. No, it's to guide us toward a deeply empathetic conclusion about how we can actually find freedom from these emotional blocks. How do we jumpstart that clock and get it ticking again?
The crucial point is this: if you recognize these traits in yourself, like if you realize, oh wow, I totally withdraw from challenges unless I know I can do them perfectly, or I crave connection but I'm terrified of being vulnerable, you absolutely shouldn't view that as a weakness. Acknowledging that your emotional clock might have stopped at some point in your past, that is actually the very first, entirely necessary step to moving forward. After all, you can't heal a wound you refuse to look at.
The article leaves us with this wonderfully comforting thought to carry with us. Real healing, it doesn't require grand sweeping gestures or totally reinventing yourself overnight. It starts with creating just one single small moment where you permit yourself to say, you know what, today it's okay to not be perfect. It's about finally giving yourself the grace that you might have been denied in the past. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought based on our explainer today. What is one small, messy, incredibly imperfect step you're going to take today simply because you finally realize that you don't have to be flawless to be absolutely worthy?